So now we can get down to business. and, and start talking about the Dhamma. The title of today's talk is Mindfulness is More Than You Think. For any of you who are keeping abreast of modern developments in Western countries, you know that the word mindfulness is a very powerful word. There are institutes of mindfulness studies in Oxford University. There are professors of mindfulness. There are lots of chairs of mindfulness studies in universities from Stanford to Harvard, again to Oxford, because governments throughout the world are finding that mindfulness has huge benefits for people's health, for people's well-being, for people's education. There are many, many benefits from helping with attention deficit disorder, healing depressions, softening the effects, or even healing cancers. It's become so popular that these days psychologists are using what they call mindfulness-based cognitive therapy, using mindfulness as a key tool in their work to heal people's emotional and physical problems. But of course, the mindfulness is one of the core parts of meditation. Mindfulness is part of Buddhism. Really, that we own the patent for mindfulness. So Buddhism should have registered that patent a long time ago. But we don't register things or keep them for ourselves. We share them with anybody. But today I'm going to be talking about what mindfulness is and what it's not, and how it can be used in ordinary things of life to improve our quality of life, let alone to see the truth of things and become enlightened. First of all, what is mindfulness? Many people think, oh yeah, we're mindful. No, you are not. To show you what mindfulness really is, there's a story I tell of the place where I live in Australia. Almost 26 years ago now, we started this monastery in Western Australia. We looked around for appropriate land, and we found a nice piece of land, 100 acres, on top of a hill in the forest. We thought it was important that we have our monastery in Australia on top of a hill, because it is the tradition that all holy men live on top of mountains. So we decided to have a mountain. You never hear of holy people living in swamps, with the exception of Yoda from Star Wars, who lived in a swamp. But that was Hollywood, not real life. So we built our monastery on top of a hill. For 9 years, I was living in that monastery. And the only time I'd go up or down that hill would be in a car. After 9 years, one day, it was a very beautiful spring morning, I had plenty of time. So I told my driver, let me out at the bottom of the hill, I will walk up. I needed the exercise, and it was a beautiful day. Why not? So as I began walking up that hillside, I had a strange experience. I could not recognize my surroundings. The hillside looked very different to what I remembered seeing through the window of a car. I saw more trees, more rocks, more detail, things which I'd missed before. It was so different, it was as if I was walking up that hillside for the very first time. So I stopped and stared, and when I stopped, the hillside changed again. As I stood still, I saw even more details, little flowers and bushes, seen the textures on the bark of the trees, and even the colors of the bark and the colors of the flowers and the grass. They became more intense, more deep, more beautiful in color. It was such a strange experience. I couldn't help trying to contemplate what had happened. And I realized, because I had been a scientist before, that when you are looking through the window of a speeding car, the light does not have enough time to form a full image on the retina at the back of your eye before another image comes in, dislodges the old image, and now you have to attend to that new image. Images come so fast when you're looking through the window of a car that none of those images are fully formed, and you miss so much. Which is why for 9 years I'd only been looking through the window of a speeding car, and I missed so much. Now I was walking and going slower. The light had more time to form a full image, so I saw more, but never as much as I saw when I stood still. Standing still, the light formed a full image. The colors were rich and deep. The detail was there, and I had time to explore it and see how much detail and also how much beauty was there in the hillside, which I had never seen before. And I realized that this is a very good simile for how we live our lives. Too many people are rushing around so fast, it is as if they are looking through the window of a speeding car, their life. And they think what they see and hear and experience is the full picture of what's out there. But because we're going so fast, we pick up so little. And what we do experience has no richness, no beauty, no happiness. Life is dull. As you slow down in your life, that was like me getting out of the car and walking. You see more, you feel more, you see more detail, and what you see is richer and more beautiful. And if you can slow down even further and even stop, only then have your senses got the time to see the whole picture. And you'll be surprised as you slow down and stop. Whatever you see is very, very beautiful. The slower you go, the stronger is your mindfulness. You are literally aware of much more than anybody else. Your brain and senses have got more time to pick up things. And the strange thing is, what I never expected, the slower you go, not just the more you see, but the more beauty you see. This explains another anecdote. I learned my meditation as a student in Cambridge over 40 years ago. I went on my first meditation retreat 39 years ago. In those days, the only way we could do a meditation retreat was during our vacation period, where we hired a couple of boarding houses. And in those boarding houses we would meditate and have our meals. And our teacher at the time said every morning before breakfast you can go for a walk outside for exercise. And knowing Cambridge, because I was a student there, and knowing where our accommodation was situated, I knew only 5 minutes away were the Cambridge Botanical Gardens. So for my 1 hour's walk every morning, I decided just to go to the gardens and walk in the beauty of a botanical nature garden. However, that first morning, as I got to the gate of those botanical gardens, I noticed there was an exceptionally beautiful bamboo tree. I never noticed it before, and it was so entrancing, I just could not take my eyes away from it. I stood there like a zombie, staring at this bamboo. Realized after 5 minutes, if I continued like this, someone would call the police and cart me away. So I noticed a seat, so I sat down on that seat and just explored the beauty of this wonderful clump of bamboo. I don't know that those of you who know artwork, in Chinese art is always in the watercolors bamboo, because the bamboo is so slender and the colors of green and yellow merge into each other. There's a whole stem of bamboo bends just so gracefully as it reaches up to the sky, and even the leaves are just slender. The whole form of a clump of bamboo is very beautiful and very enchanting. And here I was seeing this bamboo in the botanical gardens, swaying gently in the morning wind, like some dancer at one of the best ballets. It was delightful, and I spent whole 50 minutes just observing the beauty and the grace and the charm of this one clump of bamboo, until the feeling in my stomach that that breakfast is ready pulled me away, and so I went back to the retreat place. But I hadn't finished with that clump of bamboo, so I went there the following morning, and the next morning as well. Spending 8 of those 9 mornings, for one day I decided to have a real walk by the river. But for 8 of the 9 mornings of the retreat, I went there and couldn't take my eyes off the most beautiful clump of bamboo I'd ever seen in the world. When the retreat had finished, when I went back to studies, about a week or 2 afterwards, I had a free afternoon. And I thought, I'm going to go and visit the most beautiful clump of bamboo in the world. So I got on my bicycle, which all the students, even today, use in Cambridge. And I weaved my way through the busy, noisy, smelly traffic and got to the botanical gardens to see my most beautiful clump of bamboo again. And all I saw was this desiccated, grubby, dirty, malformed, the most ugly bamboo I'd ever seen. It was England. It's the wrong climate for bamboo. They have a hard time surviving. And now it looked like it. And I was so surprised. Where had my beautiful clump of bamboo gone? Because now it was just so ordinary and miserable and dirty and grubby. And I realized it was the same clump of bamboo, only when I was meditating, when I was being still, my mindfulness was increasing, so I could see beauty in it. Beauty in it which I could only see when my mind was still enough for mindfulness to become strong. And that was one experience which is always repeated. When people come on meditation retreats, they always comment on how beautiful the food is after they've been meditating. The food is ordinary, but once your mind is still, your taste buds are enhanced. You can pick up flavors you just can't see when you're not mindful. So I know how much Thai people like food. So you should all learn how to meditate before you go out to eat, and then the food will taste more delicious. The food is the same, but your mindfulness is stronger. You can pick up more. Even if you're having trouble with your marriage, send your husband on a meditation retreat for 9 days. And when he comes back, he will say, "My goodness, darling, you look so beautiful." You look exactly the same, but his mindfulness is much stronger, so he can see things he never saw before. So mindfulness is encouraged and engendered and empowered through stillness. The more still you are, the more powerful is your mind. The more you see. And the interesting thing is, the more happy you become. This is one of the reasons why mindfulness practices is the preferred treatment in UK from the British National Health Service for anyone who has depression. I've mentioned this a couple of times already in this trip to Thailand. British National Health Service did a series of clinical trials to try and find out, with their limited amounts of cash, how best they can treat depression. They trialed 3 types of treatment: medication, the pills you get from the doctor; counseling, talking over with a trained friend; and lastly, meditation. They published the results last year. To the great annoyance of the pharmaceutical companies, medication did not work. Counseling was effective but expensive. Meditation worked even better than counseling and was very cheap. So much so that now any person who goes in to a doctor's surgery in UK with depression, the preferred treatment is meditation. Why? How does it work? You should already know. When you learn how to be still, you see more beauty in things. You get more mental energy. A lot of depression is just tiredness. Deep, deep mental exhaustion. You've been working so hard, thinking so much, worrying, struggling so much, there comes a time when you've got just nothing left. The brain gives in, and it's tired, and it can't see any beauty in anything. A person who's depressed, even their favorite food has no taste. Their favorite movie is dull. Even beautiful sunsets are just ugh. Because it's nothing to do with the sunset or the food or the movie. It's everything to do with their mind just cannot register those sensory impressions to make them alive. But when they just relax and become still, whatever beauty is there, you see more of it. Whatever luscious sound or taste is there, you manage to pick more of it up. You become alive. You begin to enjoy things more, which is where depression fades away. That's why mindfulness is incredibly strong in helping people with such things as depression. But it can do many more things than that. There are other emotional problems which people have in the world, such as panic attacks or anxiety. There was a disciple in Adelaide. She's a Thai girl, but she'd been brought up, lived in Australia all her life. But because she was a Thai girl, when she got bad anxiety and depression, when the doctor and the psychologist could not help her, she had another resource to call on. Her monks. Me. She should have come to me much earlier. She would have saved a lot of time and money. Because you know, these days it's monks like me teach psychologists how to work. I give keynote addresses at psychology conferences, because what you learn from understanding meditation and your mind is so powerful. It's even more than a psychologist knows, and so you're sought after as their teacher. So this lady, she had anxiety attacks and depression while at university studying dentistry, and it got so bad that she was bedridden. Even though there was nothing physically wrong with her, she was so paranoid, she was afraid even to get out of her bedroom. She was so depressed she had no energy even just to wash her own face. She was very fortunate her boyfriend did everything for her. She's a very lucky girl having a boy which looks after you that much. And because she was a Thai, because her uncle was a close supporter of my monastery, her uncle told her, call Ajahn Brahm. And this is how we saved her life. I asked her, the next time you have an anxiety attack or depression, how does it feel in your body? Be mindful, be aware of the physical feelings. So I asked her, when you get anxious, where do you feel it? She says, I don't know. I said, I'm going to ring up in 2 or 3 days. You're going to have to tell me where you feel it. Gave her something to do. 3 days later, I feel it in my chest. Describe it to me. I don't know. I'm going to ring up in 3 days. You're going to get better than that. So then she started describing the feeling. I was just making sure she's getting aware of that physical feeling. Once she got to know it well enough to describe it to me, then I said, right, the next thing to do is when you have that feeling manifesting in your chest, which is where it was located, either massage it yourself or get your boyfriend to massage that area, to relax it, to soothe it, to comfort it, to try and relieve those physical feelings. So she did that. And 3 days later, when you relax those physical feelings, what happens to the mental feelings? The depression, the anxiety? She said, it disappears. I said, now you have your method. Because whenever you have an emotional problem, it always appears on your body somewhere as a physical feeling. Sometimes it's just too difficult to stop anxiety just by, I'm not going to be anxious. That just makes you more anxious. But when you can locate with your mindfulness anxiety in your body, you can work with physical feelings so much more easily. You can massage them, you can soothe them, you can rub oil into it or whatever. You know how to relax your body much easier than you can relax your mind. So when she learned how to relax the physical part of her emotional problem, the emotional problem also disappeared. She was out of bed in time to go back to studies. She, very bright girl, passed her examinations, got a first, and she's marrying her boyfriend, and I'm doing the ceremony for her in December. It's in my book, one of my appointments. And she was so happy with me. I'd cured her where psychologists couldn't. She actually only found out afterwards. She nominated me for Australian of the Year. I didn't get it, but nevertheless, that's how grateful she was, and how well it worked for anxiety, for panic attacks. If anyone has a panic attack, where do you feel it? Forget about what's going on in your mind. Where do you feel it in your body? Get to know that feeling. That feeling will sometimes appear before the panic attack reaches its peak. You catch that feeling, relax that feeling, and you find the panic attack doesn't mature and cause you these big problems. Even somebody else asked me a couple of days ago, and I never had the time to answer because it was in question time, about getting angry. How many of you get angry, especially at the people you love? You usually can tell how long a person's been married by how angry they get at each other. Why do you do that? And you ask these couples, they don't want to get angry at their husband. They don't want to talk like this to their wife. They just habit. They just do it. So whenever you get angry, trying to stop anger in your mind again doesn't work. When you get angry, there is a feeling in your body somewhere. So if you really want to get your anger under control and let it go, because it causes you a lot of difficulty and pain in your life, be mindful of the physical feeling of anger, the physical part of it. And when it comes up, notice it, recognize it, this is anger coming up in my body, and then start relaxing it. When you start relaxing it, lessening it, you'll find even the anger disappears, and you're not such an angry person. You also notice with mindfulness that you have certain triggers Sometimes a person says something or does something, and that always gets you off in either anger, being upset, or whatever. And this is especially in married life. In married life, sometimes we say the wrong things, someone presses our buttons, as they say, triggers these bad speech, and it causes lots of pain in our life. So what I told one couple to do, say, identify those triggers. The husband coming home late, the wife ignoring you, whatever it is, identify those triggers and use mindfulness to avoid them by doing something which I call programming your mindfulness. To understand what is programming mindfulness, I'm going to make a little detour in my talk. I'm going to give you something to do tonight as an experiment. I'm not quite sure what time you have to get up tomorrow morning, but let's just say it's 6 o'clock tomorrow morning. I'm going to ask you to set your alarm clock to 6:05, just in case this doesn't work. It's just to reassure you, that's all. It will work. And as you go to bed, as you're lying in bed, comfortable, about to go to sleep, make your mind as focused as possible and repeat to yourself 3 times, I will wake up at 6 a.m. I will wake up at 6 a.m. I will wake up at 6 a.m. And then forget about it. You know your alarm clock is there for 6:05, so you don't have to worry about anything. If it doesn't work, great, you get an extra 5 minutes. And you'll be surprised, even though there's no alarm clock in your brain, still at 6 a.m., 1 minute either side, you will wake up. You'll wake up, open your eyes, and know what time is it. You look at your clock, 1 minute before, 1 minute afterwards, or bang on sometimes. You've got your internal clock, and you can program your mind this way. You can tell your mind when you go to sleep, and it remembers when it's time to wake up. That's how the mind can work. And experiment with this. Try this tonight. You'll be surprised how easy it is to do. In my first meditation retreat, I learned this trick, and I couldn't believe just how effective it is. How your mind can work if you program it. So, you say the wrong things to your partner, or there's some triggers which makes you upset. You identify that trigger and you say, when my husband comes home late, I will not get angry. When my husband comes home late, I will not get angry. When my husband comes home, I won't get angry. Program your mindfulness. Then what happens is, husband comes home late, as usual, you're about to get angry again, and you will find at that moment, just before you get angry, the instruction will come up. I will not get angry. You'll be able to take a different course and not just be a creature of habit, always doing the same response to the same trigger every time. You can stop your anger. Or like a person who keeps smoking, and they know it's bad for their health, but they just can't stop. So they can program their mindfulness. Smokers have told me that sometimes they try and stop smoking, but the cigarette's actually in their mouth, lit, before they know it. It's just habit. So they can program their mindfulness. They'll say, I will not pick up that first cigarette. I will not pick up that first cigarette. I will not pick up that first cigarette. 3 times, focused on it, and then forget about it. And what happens is they're going the same habit. They're about to pick up that cigarette without realizing it. And because they put that program in their mind, they program their mindfulness, they're about to pick up the cigarette, and the thought comes and says, I'm not going to pick this up. They can stop. Programming your mindfulness gives you more power. It's telling your mind where to put your mindfulness on the very difficult and problematical parts of your life. It's how you can break any habit if you want to. Just like on a computer, we have things like Norton antivirus. This is Buddha's anti-mental virus. for all these bad programs which make your life miserable. And it works. This is how people use mindfulness to help their life, so you don't be a creature of habit, especially bad habits. And it's easy to do. But also, I'm mentioning that mindfulness is great for your health. A lot of times, because I'm a monk, because I meditate, because I have many moments of stillness, I can become very aware of my body and how it's feeling. I know when I'm tired, and I know when my body needs a break. And if it needs a break, I give it a break. Many of you are so busy, even the body is screaming at you, slow down, stop. You say, not now, tomorrow. There's a saying in the West that death is nature's way of telling you to slow down. However, it's a bit late then. So when you're mindful, you can actually feel your body from within. You can feel your heart. You can feel your breast. You know if there's something going wrong in it. You can feel the organs. You can feel sort of your guts. And when you can know what's going on in there, it's amazing what you can do to heal yourself and to relax those parts of the body. The body is a very well evolved machine, and it actually tells you when something is wrong if you would only listen to it and take heed. Again, because we're going so fast, we miss the signs until often it's too late. The more mindful you are, you feel there's something wrong with the heart. You feel there's something wrong with the leg. You can feel this because you're aware. And once you're aware of these things, you can take preventative action. Again, one of the most important preventative action is just resting. Sometimes people think they have no time to rest. However, resting is saving time. What do I mean that resting is saving time? If when you're really tense and tired, you take 5 minutes rest, you find those 5 minutes you spent just relaxing, you make up later on with greater efficiency. You don't make so many mistakes. You complete your work to a higher quality in lesser time because your mind is efficient. I've been teaching this to school kids who sometimes do their assignments on their computer late into the night. And I tell them, look, there's sometimes you're looking at that computer and your brain is just dull. You can look at it and you don't produce hardly anything. If you do produce something, it's rubbish. Low quality work because your brain isn't sort of running to its top potential. If that's the case, you should know, be mindful enough, take a break. 5 minutes, listen to some music or relax or do something. And when you go back to the work after 5 or 10 minutes, because you're relaxed, because your brain has been revived, then you can work to a much higher potential. Look, do you remember what you did when you were at school? When you went to school, you had lessons. Didn't you have playtime, recess, 2 or 3 times during the day? Why did you have recess? It's because every educator knows if you keep putting that information into a child continually for 7 or 8 hours, they cannot absorb anything. The brain becomes tired. When it becomes tired, it can't understand anything. It can't sort of perform. No wonder people's work is of low quality sometimes, especially in the afternoon when they get tired. So, wouldn't it be a wonderful thing to actually take a break? I said last night at Sasin that Dell Computer Company in the US has a timeout room. The timeout room is a place where anyone in that company can go at any time to relax. that room or group of rooms is shielded from electromagnetic radiation. So you cannot be SMS, texted, or receive any communication by any means while you're in that compound. It's easy to do, so that no one can call you or get to you in the time-out room. And Dell Computer Company is a very successful company, one of the top companies, and I think it's still making a decent profit even in these hard economic times. Because it knows to succeed in today's world, you have to be efficient. You can't afford people making mistakes or not doing their job to high quality. And if they're tired, they cannot perform well. So resting is actually an investment of time. Not just in time for your work, but investment in your health. It's much better to spend 5 minutes a day resting and getting your health back than spend 3 or 4 weeks in the hospital every year with all these sicknesses. You're saving time. So if you're mindful and aware, you can actually feel your body. I need a break. Give yourself a break. Otherwise, you're dead. Do you want to die young? Do you want to be, as we say in Australia, the richest person in the cemetery? It's a stupid idea. So we learn how to relax more. So mindfulness actually gets us in touch with our body and our physical feelings. So we can actually do something about it and heal ourselves. The other thing you can do when you're mindful, when you feel parts of the body, especially if they're sick, say you've just had some sort of operation, like a hysterectomy. You've got this big wound in your chest, which is painful. When you're mindful of this wound, you feel it. You also can actually send kindness there. This beautiful energy of metta in Buddhism, or love, or compassion. It's amazing what you can do if you're mindful of that area and send something good, some good energy there. I tell some of the disciples over in Australia, do this. Next time you have an operation, if you're just giving a cesarean birth, or you're having mastectomy, or having some other little operation, you got this wound on your chest. Be mindful of it. Fill your awareness with the feeling of that part of the body, even if it's painful. Send it kindness and learn how to relax it. What I mean by that is an experience when I was growing up in London, poor part of London, West London, lots of immigrants in that area, living in a council flat which was a government subsidized apartment because our family was very poor. So most of the time when you weren't sort of at school, you were out in the streets playing soccer with your friends. That's what you used to do growing up, playing soccer. If I hadn't become a monk, who knows? Well, I might be a top soccer player. I don't know. I spent lots of time playing anyway. But because you're playing in the streets rather than in some sort of field, every time you went for a tackle, sometimes you'd fall over, you'd cut yourself, you'd bruise yourself, and so many times I'd scrape the skin off my knees and graze it and have blood and be in pain. You go running to your mother, "Mum, I've cut myself again." And all she would do, she'd put her mouth to that wound, and she called it kissing it better. And straight away the pain would go away, and I'd go back out and play soccer again. She was my sort of medical officer. These days, I wonder how on earth that worked, because imagine what she was doing, putting her mouth full of germs on an open wound. How on earth that didn't get infected, I don't know, but perhaps I do know, because she gave it kindness. Do you remember when maybe you were sick as a kid, and your mother came along and reassured you, and just gave you some kindness, and how that took the pain away, at least most of it, and maybe contributed to you getting healthy again? Never underestimate the power of kindness. You know it works. And so just being mindful of a part of the body and giving it kindness, giving it compassion, heals. Which is why in many hospitals in Australia, such as our local hospital, Sir Charles Gardner Hospital, one of the main teaching hospitals in Perth. They have a department there for people who especially are undergoing chemotherapy and radiation therapy to learn things like meditation, to learn things like Reiki or massage or something, just to give some attention and kindness to their sickness. And it works, it helps. If you can't afford that from other people, you can actually do it for yourself, as self-healing, by being mindful and being kind to a part of the body. And that really, really works. So this mindfulness, you can make use of it even for your health. You can also make use of it in your business. Again, as I was saying in Sasin, the key to success in your business or in your place in that office is your ability to communicate. And communication needs a huge amount of mindfulness. How many people here have experienced, even today, you've been talking to someone and they just have not been listening? And no communication has happened. I don't know how many people have marriage problems. They come and see me. I don't know why they come and see a monk when they got marriage problems, because I haven't been married. I became a monk to try and avoid all those problems, and now they come and dump it on me. But so many people, as you know, they have marriage problems because they just can't communicate with each other. If you're going to live a happy life with someone, you have to be a very skilled communicator. If you're going to be a manager in any sense, in an office, in a company, you have to be a skilled communicator. If you are going to be a salesperson, it's all about how to communicate. And of course, as someone pointed out to me today, I'm a great salesperson. I go around the world selling Dhamma and meditation and Buddhism. I'm into marketing. And how can you market anything except by learning how to communicate well? To communicate well, you have to learn how to listen. Following story might give you some insights. In our monastery over in Australia, some years ago, I passed our monastery kitchen and looked through the window. There are 6 Thai ladies cooking the morning meal for the monks. Only 6 people were in there, 6 Thai women. And as I looked through the window, I saw every one of those women were talking. They had their mouth open. Now, being a scientist before, I started contemplating. If 6 people have got their mouth open, and 6 people are doing the talking, and there's only 6 people in that room, who's left to do the listening? Answer was no one was left to do the listening. What a waste of time all that talking was. If you're going to be talking, you have to have someone listening. And too often, people are doing the talking, and no one is doing the listening. Now you become very wise if you learn how to listen. And the way to listen and get the power, in other words, understand what other people are up to, is to be silent and aware, fully aware. If your mouth is not moving, but your brain is moving when someone's talking to you, again, you're not listening. Your husband is coming home and telling you you can't afford to have another dress. And he's saying that, and you're thinking, here he goes again. What does he know? I've heard this so many times. Yak, 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 yak. If that's what's going in your brain, you're not listening to him. It's the same with you. Sort of, when you speak to your husband, he's not listening to you. To be able to listen, you've got to be quiet, fully aware, and listening. I'm going to prove how easy it is to be quiet inside, to be silent without a thought going on in your mind. as I'm doing this exercise, I want you not just to listen to what I'm saying. I also want you to be mindful of what's going on inside your own mind. Because as I'm speaking, you'll begin to notice many pauses between my words. In those spaces between my words, what was going on in your mind? You were aware without thinking. Because you were waiting for me to speak. You never knew when I was going to start speaking again. There it is again. The silent, aware mind. Now, if you can cultivate that degree of silence, where you're waiting in the moment, aware, but not thinking inside, it's amazing what information you can pick up from your partner. You can really get to know them that way, by listening to them with mindful silence. This is where you become wise and resourceful. Imagine you can do that with your boss at work. Mindful, silent, just gathering information. Then you can outwit your boss. Just the same, if you can listen with mindful silence to your husband, it's so easy to outwit husbands. This is mindfulness practice. What I noticed, when I first went to Australia, I was number 2 monk. There was another monk who was senior to me, so he was the boss. And I had to work out, when you had a boss, how you can still get your own way. So this is how to do it. This was an example which actually happened. I was walking through my monastery in Australia with this senior monk, my boss. And I said, why don't we build a hut on the hill over there? And he replied, that's a stupid idea. No way, that's ridiculous. Now, I'm wise enough not to argue. I'd done all that was necessary, so I shut up. And I never mentioned it again for 2 weeks. When I knew he'd forgotten about it, I'd bring it up again. Why do we build a hut on the hill over there? Ridiculous idea, stupid, he would say. All right, and I would drop it again. Usually 2 weeks later, we were walking together, and he would say, I've just had an idea. Why do we build a hut on the hill over there? They'd always say, wow, what a great idea. I think that's a good idea. Yeah, why not? This is how it works. It's psychology. Because once you put an idea in somebody's head, as long as you don't argue with it and they recognize, it really is your idea, you just put it in there. It's called brainwashing. You put the idea in there, and subconsciously they think about it. Sometimes you have to reinforce it, after 2 weeks, when you know they've forgotten about it, reinforce it just to get the wheels in motion again. And if it's a really good idea, then they will know it's a good idea. The thing is, by this method, they think it's their idea. And that's the crucial trick. So, you tell your husband, I think I really do need a new dress. A stupid idea, economic difficulty, we can't afford it. Okay, that's a good point. 2 weeks later, I think I really need a new dress, Oh, no way, can't do it. You'll be surprised 2 weeks later, he'll come and say, I think you deserve a new dress. Oh, that's so kind of you, darling husband. Ha 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 ha. It's just psychology, it works. It's like programming another person's mindfulness. But we do it all wrong by arguing with them. No, I need a new dress. No, you can't have one. I demand one. I'm going to divorce you if I don't get one. Now, that never works. So please be smart. Use Buddhist psychology. It's very, very powerful. If you're Buddhist, you might as well exploit it as much as you can. Now this is how it works. Unfortunately, if your husband's in this audience, it won't work because you know what you're up to now. So don't give him the tape. But by making suggestions like this, we're understanding what mindfulness actually is and how it works and how powerful it is. Really, mindfulness is just this power of your own mind, learning how this mind works and working with it, exploiting it, using it. It's a very powerful thing, this mind, and especially if you learn how to keep it still, it gets very, very strong and very aware. I've been teaching this a long time now in schools and universities. Schools and universities today are very competitive. You know, to get a place in a good university, to get a good grade and get a good job, you know, you need to have a competitive advantage. And if you learn how to be mindful, number one, you can totally listen to the lecturer. Now, I must have been a monk before in a previous life. Actually, my mother said I was born without hair, so that's probably a reason why. But even from an early age at school, I had a very good memory. And I wondered why. And it was because I knew how to listen. When the teacher was talking, my mind was silent. And I was soaking everything in. I wasn't trying to remember. I was just relaxing, being still and silent, and everything was going in. And because it went in, I had all this information there. It wasn't sort of being interrupted by my own thoughts. These days I describe it like a sponge. If you've got a sponge which is wet, it doesn't soak up very much. If you've got a sponge which is really dry, it can soak up everything. So if you've got a mind which is empty, which is still, which has got no thoughts in it, whatever you hear, you soak up. But if you've got thoughts, reactions, if your mind is busy while someone else is talking, hardly anything gets absorbed. So I teach in schools, look, if you really want to learn with ease, so you don't have to keep repeating the lesson, so you can understand once. When you read a book, you don't have to read it twice, so you can get your homework done in half the time and go to the party the rest of the night. Learn how to be mindful and alert, and your grades go up. Over in Australia, I was saying this afternoon, at high school, you know, before they go to universities, they give a series of exams. Every state in Australia has got a different series of exams. In West Australia, they call it the TEEs, Tertiary Entrance Examination. And the person who got the top marks this year and got the medal, the top marks in the whole of Western Australia, was one of my disciples. He meditates. He had his competitive advantage. He goes to the Buddhist temple every week. See, it works. He got the top mark in the whole state. So if you want your kids to get top marks, teach them a little bit of mindfulness. And tell them, look, you're going to get better marks with less work. And that's very, very, very enticing. I don't have to work so hard but still get better marks, simply because you're training your mind. And you people who are in business, maybe you have to read a report, maybe you have to write a report, or give some presentation to the boss. How do you do it? Practice a bit more mindfulness. Make your mind strong, so you can read all the information silently, so it all goes in. And when you write the report, it can all come out very easily. There's another disciple. She went to Monash University in Melbourne, studying medicine. Came top every year. Top marks the whole university. And she hardly ever went to it. No, she went to the lectures. She didn't go to the tutorials. And all her friends said, how on earth can you do that? And she had learned meditation in Sri Lanka when she was a kid. She knew how to listen in silence. So she absorbed all the information. And she told me when she did the examinations, All she did was read the question silently, and the first thought which came out of her mind, she wrote it down immediately. Always correct. It's a great way of using a mind. And she said she never had to work very hard. Always getting top marks. That's called mental efficiency. So for you to compete in this very difficult world, a little bit of mindfulness training means, wow, you really go up a few echelons in this world. Very, very successful person, as well as healthy and all this. This is like the perfect thing for everybody. The best thing about it doesn't cost anything. It's for free. You're so fortunate in a Buddhist country like Thailand. You get all these amazing teachings for nothing. That's why sometimes people think they're worthless. Over in Australia, I got a call from a lady one evening, and she said, "How much do you charge for your talks?" We said, "Nothing." She said, "Well, you can't be any good then." And people think that if you're very good, you have to charge 1,000 baht. Just like some of these guys who go to these big hotels in Bangkok, and they wear sharp suits and nice hair, and they sort of go up and charge you, maybe not 1,000, they're charging US dollars, $500 for a seminar. And what you hear here is actually better. These guys get all the stuff from us, and they charge, you get it for free here. That's why these days I never say my talks are free. I always say they're priceless. Priceless, no price. It's much better. So, these things, they really work, and they're very, very powerful. So mindfulness isn't about thinking. Mindfulness is about listening, being still. And if anyone wants to find out about the bigger truths and philosophies of life, then the only way you can be wise is actually to listen and to gather information, to gather data. Too often people think too quickly when they haven't got all the information. We come to conclusions too fast. And I'm going to give you an example of this. Some years ago, as many of you will know, there was a series of scandals in Thailand about Buddhist monks. Buddhist monks having mistresses. And that's terrible. That's against our rules. We shouldn't do that. So I was in Perth when all these scandals were erupting. And I decided one evening to make a confession. In front of all my long-standing disciples, I told them, some years ago, I spent some of the happiest hours of my life in the loving arms of another man's wife. We kissed, we hugged, and that woman had a husband. And some of my disciples, I'm not Ajahn Brahm as well. Some of them were almost out the door. What do you mean, kissing a woman who was somebody else's husband? That's adultery, isn't it? No, that woman was my mother. My father was her husband. I was a kid. I spent some of the most happy hours of my life in the loving arms of my mother, another man's wife. Now, you see that sometimes we jump to a conclusion without all the evidence. And that's why we make big mistakes in life. So when we're mindful, we learn how to listen more, to gather information, and then come to a conclusion. You might hear this story sort of on the TV, because I was interviewed yesterday with the guy called Suranan. I think he was a spokesman of Thaksin's government some time ago. They argued about the problem with the governments in Thailand, the red shirts and the yellow shirts. Because, the brown, this is actually a combination of yellow and red. A much better colour. But anyhow, and I told them, you should all know this story. This is a classic Buddhist story of the 7 blind men and the elephant. This was in the Udana, taught by the Buddha. And Just 1 year ago, I was invited to this huge leadership retreat with all the government of Australia, the Prime Minister, the Deputy Prime Minister, and the guy who introduced it, he introduced this Buddhist tale. It's so well known, they teach this to Australian government. So I'm sure the Thai government, at least they should know this story, the blind man and the 7 blind men and the elephant. Story goes like this. A king had a government who were always arguing. This was supposed to be 2,000 years ago, 2,500 years ago. It shows that politics never changes. And so the king, he could not tell these ministers to cooperate. So he had to give them an object lesson, an exercise. So he called a holiday, and he had all the ministers in the stadium for some entertainments. And part of the entertainment, the king led a royal elephant into the middle of the stadium, and then personally led 7 men who'd been blind since birth into the stadium, and put the first blind man's hand on the elephant's trunk. Now this had been a blind man who'd heard the word elephant, but had never seen one. Blind man, this is an elephant. The second blind man put on the elephant's tusks, the third on its ears, the fourth on its head, the fifth on its body, the sixth on its legs, the 7th on the elephant's tail, letting the man feel the elephant's tail, saying, blind man, this is an elephant. Then he asked the first blind man who felt the trunk, sir, can you please explain in a loud voice what an elephant is? And he said, actually, I always wondered what an elephant is, but now I know. It's a snake. It's like a python. I know, because I can feel it. A python, you idiot, said the guy who felt the trunk, the tusks. An elephant is a farmer's plough. It can't be a plough, said the guy who felt the ears. It's a fan which people use to keep themselves cool. A fan, said the guy who felt the head. No way! Where were you born, you idiot? An elephant is a water tank. A water pot? It can't be. It's a rock, a big solid rock, said the guy who felt the body. I know, I can feel it. You can't feel anything, you stupid idiot, imbecile, said the guy who felt the legs. It is a tree trunk. Yes, that's what it is. It's a tree trunk. A tree trunk? You're an idiot too. I'm the only one who knows what an elephant is. It's a fly whisk. That's what it is. And according to the story, these blind men started fighting each other. How blind men can actually aim their fists, I don't know, but that's what the story said. And they all had a point. They all thought that they knew because they was based on their personal experience. Just like the red shirts, the yellow shirts, even the brown shirts, we always think that we're the ones who are right. Now, instead of competing with each other and conflicting our experiences, wouldn't it be a wonderful thing if we cooperated and combined our experiences? If those 7 men had sat down and compared notes, then they would have come up with the conclusion, an elephant is a big rock on 4 tree trunks. It's got a fly whisk at the back end and a water pot above a bit at the front end. On either side of the water pot is 2 fans with 2 ploughs underneath and a snake in the middle. And that's a pretty good description of an elephant for someone who will never see one. Have you noticed you get far closer to the truth if you listen to each other and combine information rather than arguing who is right? Mindfulness allows us to listen and have a bigger picture of the world, a wider understanding, and that mindfulness will stop much of the conflict which exists in our world. Mindfulness training is used in conflict resolution practices in the West. People in conflict, whether it's a husband and wife about to get divorced, whether it's people having some dispute in the courts. Sometimes what the psychologists do is get the two people to sit in front of each other, one to speak, and after they've spoken, see if the other person has listened. What did he say? And you'll be amazed that what he said and what she heard were not the same things. So they've got to say it again until they hear accurately what the other people say. Then there's communication happening. It's a shame you need a psychologist to help you with that. And then she has a chance. She says, what does he hear her saying? He doesn't hear her. That's why they need to have more mindfulness, so you truly hear what each other is saying. When you truly hear what each other is saying, a lot of conflict is overcome. There's an old story of two women arguing over an orange. One woman said, "It's my turn to have the orange." They only had one orange, so it's mine. The other woman said, "I know it's your turn to have the orange, but you had it twice before I had it once, so this is my turn." They had argument about the orange. No one was going to give in, so they decided to have a compromise. They cut the orange in half. If they'd only listened to each other, there was another solution. They cut the orange in half, and the first woman peeled her half of the orange, threw the peel into the trash can, and ate the flesh. The second woman peeled her half of the orange, threw the flesh into the trash can because she wanted the peel to bake a cake. If they'd only listened to each other, why do you want an orange? They'd have found out that one wanted the orange to eat the flesh, the other one wanted the peel. One woman could have a whole orange, the other woman could have a whole peel. In conflict, we don't listen to each other. And that's why we lose so much. Too much ends in the trash can. So mindfulness teaches us how to listen. Not to think, but how to be aware. Listen to gather information. And when we gather information, information is power. Information is power, and power is the key to finding solutions in so many things in life. Not just, again, conflict, even the deeper truths of life. Who are you? Sometimes we have all these ideas, but we should be mindful and listen. When we listen to life, then maybe we can hear what she's teaching us. When we're busy talking, in other words thinking, when life is teaching us, we can miss too much. A lot of the time, my teacher Ajahn Brahm would learn so much just by listening to life, especially listening to life in the forest and the jungles. There he saw so many teachings, because so many truths, because he was listening to nature. Nature is always teaching you. She is always giving you lessons about life, but too often we're too busy to listen, which is why we never get wise. One of the things he would do, looking for something, here we go. He would pick up something and say, "How heavy is this stick? How heavy is this piece of wood?" "It's only heavy when I hold it. It's not heavy now." He was saying, how heavy is the economic crisis in Thailand? It's only heavy when you worry about it. How painful is the death of a loved one? You may have lost your husband, your wife, or your child, or your father or mother recently. How heavy is that? It's only heavy when you hold it. Little teachings like that came from being aware of the world around him. Little teachings like that are there for you every day. And you realize the death of someone, whether they're young or old, it's only a problem, it's only heavy, it's only pain when you keep holding it. If you let it go, put it down, then it's no longer a problem. That's why mindfulness practices teaches you so much about the nature of life. And it's from these that Buddhism develops its wisdom. When people in Australia, especially when I go to schools, they ask me, what are the holy books of Buddhism? Because sometimes they ask, well, the Christians have the Bible, the Muslims have the Quran, the Jews have the Torah, the Hindus have the Vedas and Upanishads. What do the Buddhists have? What's their holy book? I always say, the Buddhist holy book is meditation. Mindfulness. That's what we read. That's where we get our truths. That's where we get our understanding. By listening in silence as the world is constantly teaching us. And that's a wisdom which gives